Commonwealth's attorneys and I have concluded that the NCAA sanctions were overreaching and unlawful.
Someone's got to develop a product that you and I as a consumer are going to want to buy.
Our country needs a comprehensive energy plan.
Hello and welcome to this edition of For the Record. On Tuesday, voters in the State College Area School District go to the polls to vote on infrastructure investment in the State College High School and other buildings. And joining us to talk about that today are Amber Concepion from the State College School Board and Scott DeShong, principal at State College Area High School. Welcome, both of you, to For the Record.
Thank you.
What was the impetus to get this referendum vote taking place? Start us from the beginning to where we will be on Tuesday to vote on it, if you would.
Well, I think the main reason that we're having the referendum is because the facilities at our high school campus are, they were built in the late 50s. They're at this point over 50 years old. They're in need of a real upgrade at this point. A lot of the systems in those buildings are failing. We know we're going to have to replace those systems, but as we've had conversations throughout the community and done a lot of interaction with the community, we found that the community really would like to see a plan for a high school campus and buildings that are centered around students' experiences.
Let me read the referendum word for word. Shall debt in the sum of $85 million for the purpose of financing new construction and renovations for the State College Area High School be authorized and incurred as debt approved by the elections? A straight yes or no vote. First of all, I have to give you kudos for whoever came up with that, because that's probably the most straightforward referendum question that's ever been asked on a ballot. It's a straightforward, do you want to invest in this or do you not want to invest in that?
Right. That's right.
Who was part of that plan to put that question in place on the ballot that way?
Well, that wording actually is derived from the Local Government Unit Debt Act. So the state of Pennsylvania really provides the wording, some suggested wording. It's not the exact wording that we have to use, but that's the suggested wording from the state. So we went with that.
Scott, a lot of people don't realize that the State College High School is actually two buildings across the street from each other.
It is.
What will be the main focus? Which side starts first, south or north?
Absolutely. The first step in the process, Steve, is going to be to build classroom space on the south side of our campus. The reason for that is so we can create space to move our students into when we work on additional renovations and some new construction on what's currently the south building. The end goal, really summarized pretty quickly, is to have all of our academic programs on the south side of the street.
What kinds of safety issues are there? Because one of the things that you talk about, safety and security, is one of the main reasons why this upgrade needs to go into place.
Sure.
Kids have to cross the street from one building to the other, correct?
That is correct.
And how do you manage that? Are there certain specific times of day that happens, or can that be from one class to another class or moving back and forth?
I think everything you just brought up describes our safety and security challenges at the high school. The south building was built in 1962 originally as a junior high. The north building was built in 1955 originally as a senior high for students in grades 10, 11, 12, so there was no crossing of the street. As we all know, issues regarding school security have changed significantly over the last 15 to 20 years. We have over 90 exterior doors between our two high school buildings. Additionally, every 47 minutes, students cross the street to attend programs on the opposite side of the street. So 2/3 of our kids will cross the street and return at least once per day. And when I say cross the street, really what I mean is they'll leave one building, typically they cross a bus lane, go through a parking lot, then cross Westerly Parkway, which if you're not familiar with Westerly Parkway, it's a pretty major thoroughfare in State College. Then they cross another parking lot and possibly another bus lane in order to get from one building to another.
These kids aren't crossing the street on their own, so you have to have staff there. And is that an all-day process then, that you have to have people, crossing guards, essentially be there all day?
It is. Our crossing guards will start assisting students at about 7:45 in the morning, and their day ends close to 3:45 in the afternoon.
Wow. This referendum, the budget's roughly $85 million. How did you come up with that number in terms of what you need to do per building? Let's start with the south building. What all needs to be, you're adding classrooms. So how many classrooms would that be roughly?
Well, we're looking at about 117 classrooms. We'll have a very similar number of classrooms when this entire project is all said and done. And if we look at the project in totality, 40% of it is renovation, 60% of it is new construction. In the south building, really what we're looking at doing is adding some classroom space, as well as adding some gymnasium and auditorium space for use not only during the school day, but after the school day as well. And then really in the north building, what we'll be doing is we'll be bringing our Delta program, which is an alternative high school within our school district. We'll be moving that from the Fairmont Avenue building over to the north building, and we'll be relocating our physical plant operations to the north building, as well as our district food service operations. Currently in the south building, we prepare food for most of the elementary schools in the district and transport that then during the day. That function will also be in the north building.
Amber, the great thing about this referendum, you have made it a point, your group has gone out and talked to various groups. You go out and talk to anybody who would.
That's
Describe
right.
that process. I mean, I know I have friends who live in the State College School District. You went to talk to them. What's been the reception as you've gone out and talked to people?
I think it's been a really positive reception in terms of people are eager to hear about the project. They know that because the community will be making a decision, that they need to be informed as to what the implications are of their vote on May 20th. And really the communication process began in January of 2013, right as we were beginning the project planning with our architects. And so we had a series of community forums at that time, and we also began making lists of groups in the community in terms of civic groups or religious groups, or even like going to municipalities. We made lists of groups. These are groups that we want to make sure that we'd like to be able to go talk with. And we didn't, of course, our resources in terms of time are somewhat limited, but we've been, at an average of about 30 events per month.
That's about one a day.
Yeah.
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 And you
So
were about
we
a time
have been-
constraint. Yeah, that's an outstanding.
So we've been making sure that we have been able to reach as many groups as we're interested in having us speak to them. We have gone to speak with those groups,
Now,
as well as our.
You mentioned that the process started in January of 2013 because you don't just wave your magic wand and the referendum ballot starts then. Who did you engage as your architect to look at this in 2013? Who was that?
Well, we made the decision about the architect in 2012, and that was Crabtree Rohrbaugh. And we just chose the Crabtree Rohrbaugh architecture firm because they have a great track record of building public school buildings throughout the Mid-Atlantic region. They've built award-winning buildings that are LEED certified, and they come in on budget. They are a really budget-friendly firm to work with. So that was a big driving
That's
point.
a good stopping point for us. Back with more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. We're discussing the State College Referendum and Improvement Plan. Amber, I stopped you when we talked about the architect and the budget. How much input did they give you? How much did the school board itself, and how much did you reach out before you put this proposal together? Did the local impact and faculty impact come to create this plan?
Well, we began looking at the budget for this project back in January of 2013 when our architects brought us 6 concepts. They brought us 6 concepts for how we could approach the buildings and moving forward with those. And we had the budget ranged from about $70 million for a renovation only of the 2 buildings as they exist on Westerly Parkway without moving walls or the configuration, up to about $140 million as a possible budget, which would have been the budget if we were to do 2 high schools. So as we were refining the concepts, we were refining the budget. When we went to a community survey, we started the survey process in early 2013. That was mailed out in May or June of 2013. About 7,000 State College area residents received a survey, and we had about 25% response rate, which is really it was a great response rate for a mail survey. And one of the things that we found was that people tended to not want the least expensive, and they didn't want the most expensive.
Right.
They wanted something that was a concept for this building that was a moderate concept. And that is where our budget has come from, is that we were trying to do something that combined renovation and new construction to come up with a budget that seemed reasonable. But really it's the community that will have to decide that when they go to the polls on May 20th.
Scott, how much faculty input did you have along the way? What you're hearing from your teachers especially? Because not only were teachers moving back and forth as well as kids?
Absolutely. Yeah. That process really started in earnest in November of 2012. We were working with an educational planner called Brain Spaces, and they actually came in and worked with over 2,000 of our students in one day to kind of talk about what do you enjoy about your educational experiences and what needs to be improved about your educational experiences. And then we moved that conversation forward with our teachers and with student government representatives, because really what we do during the school day, really before, during, and after the school day, needs to inform the design of a facility. The form of the facility has to follow the function. So what are we doing really well, and what would we like to look at some opportunities that we have to do better, and how could we improve upon that? We continue to work with our faculty and staff, and like I said, student government representatives around that, shared information with the community. We have a big high school. We have a unique high school in that we have a career and technical center as part of our offerings for our students. With over 2,400 students, 13 career and technical programs, in addition to the normal, I would say, offerings at a high school, we have a lot of unique opportunities. At the same time, the group that really focused on this effort focused on the theme of no student left unknown. How can we get teachers and students in an environment where our teachers know our students as learners and as people, and we can help them as they develop through their high school and pursue their post-secondary goals. That's really been the focus of the work with our teachers.
Amber, you brought up a subject about the two high schools.
Yes.
Years ago, that was a topic of discussion. I think it was 07, I think, or 05, one of those years, about is it cheaper to build two separate schools? Clearly, if it's going to be $120 million to add a second high school, that's way off the chart in terms of this $85 million. How much push was there to create a second high school within the school district itself?
Well, the quote that we had from the architects was that it would be about 140 total to renovate the existing buildings and add a second high school at another location. But what we looked at was results from our community survey, where we found that most of the community would not support going to a two high school model. And we would actually be the smallest school district in Pennsylvania to have two high schools if we had gone that route. One of the other things that we looked at was what the operating cost would be for two high schools. There would be a significant increase in the cost of operating two high schools in terms of staffing and duplicating programs.
And the nightmare would be, I would think, if you lived on the edge of the new boundaries or something like that, and you wanted to be downtown and you're out now off, I would assume it'll be out in Grays Woods in that area. If you're going to look at one of those areas, wherever you're going to look at, those kids would be like, wait a minute, I don't want to go to the new school. I'm pretty happy where I was, and I want to be part of this team versus that team, because then you go into two different unique separations like that.
There's an extent to which it would divide the community.
Right.
But we really looked at what did the community support, and that it was clear from the survey results that the community supported keeping the high school on Westerly Parkway and to continue to operate one State College area high school.
Has there been any significant pushback that you've gotten from the community? Like, why are you doing this in the first place? Or this is outrageously too much money? Or anything? What are the negatives you've heard, either from each of you individually, because you're representing the school district about that? What are some of are there any negatives, big negatives out there that you've heard from anybody?
No, I have not heard anyone suggest that we should not be updating the high school buildings. That's one that I've actually not heard so far. I think pretty much everyone agrees that we need to do something about these buildings. I know that there's been a few letters to the editor regarding the cost. There's been letters to the editor on both sides of this, both that it's important to make this investment and from those who have some concern about the cost.
Scott, from your perspective, what will the logistical nightmare be during the construction? Because this is going to be during the school year.
Absolutely.
What pressures does that add to you overseeing this?
Our campus is just over 80 acres. We'll be limited in terms of where we can put construction equipment for a significant upgrade, as we're talking about. What the architects have started to look at, and we're hitting pause till we see how this referendum turns out, is a three-step process. And with their three steps, or the three phases that they propose, we're still going to be able to support and sustain programming before, during, and after the school day. They've been pretty strategic about that. We still have a lot of questions to answer in terms of how are we going to alter parking? Are we going to be able to offer as much parking as we're able to offer now? And some of the other logistical concerns just with getting people to and from the high school will provide to be a challenge. And as we already talked about, we do have students move from one side of the street to the other during the school day. There's some elements of the plan that address that. Obviously, we're going to have to keep our eye on that pretty closely as the construction progresses.
The State High Yes philosophy, who came up with that concept?
Well, there's a group called Friends of State High, and they're operating separately from the school district.
Okay.
It's a citizens action group, just a group of concerned citizens, and those signs were produced by Friends of State High.
It's a good stopping point for us. Back with more For the Record right after this. Welcome back to For the Record. We're discussing the State College area referendum vote on Tuesday and the infrastructure investments that will be made by the voters. Amber, Scott, this referendum, is it strictly based for the money will be spent strictly for the buildings itself? This won't involve anything to do with more educational programs or staffing or anything like that?
The wording of the referendum question restricts using the funding entirely for renovations and new construction for the high school buildings and grounds.
And the reason the referendum is needed is because of the amount of money, correct? Because is it Act 1 that limits
Act
the
1,
amount of what
that's
you can
right.
raise? So this is strictly for an infrastructure
Investment.
How much of what is on the drawing board right now as a potential is on your wish list? How much did you get to decide of what you wanted and what you could afford? Because that's really the balance here.
Sure.
How much of that is what you see as what you wanted?
That's a really good question, and I'll refer back to what I said earlier about our educational model, or what we do before and during and after the school day. If we can use that as our goal for the function, and the form follows that, I think the architects did a really, really nice job at working with small groups of our teachers and with us as administrators, even with our students, to say, what are you looking for in terms of teaching, learning, and student experiences, and how will that then translate into a building? As we look at potentially using this building for 50 years, flexibility was a real key as well. And I think flexibility is something that folks would see throughout this design when they give it a good look.
You mentioned you went with this architect. There are specific architects that do specific things. Some architects are very good about building shopping malls, and some are good at building schools.
Exactly.
How did you go through the vetting process of finding the right educational institution architect for the project?
Well, we have a Citizens Advisory Committee for Facilities, and they did help us with that process. We had put out an RFP for architect firms to provide proposals to us, and then that Citizens Advisory Committee did look at those, but we've also had people who work in the school district who are familiar with architects throughout the state who also were looking at those proposals very carefully. And so we were looking to balance both architects that do great buildings that would meet our needs educationally, and architects who have some vision for the future, with architects who come in at a budget-friendly price. And so Crabtree was really in that sweet spot for us.
One of the things that I had heard was there was a flooding issue in the music area. Will that be addressed? Well, I'm guessing it's going to be, are you going to create a new music area itself altogether, or will you just be an upgrade of the current situation?
Currently, our music programs are all located in the north building, and we'll be moving our music programs over to the south side of the street. So that obviously will be addressed just in that change of location. But in addition, with the upgrades to the north side of the street, there'll be some grading involved and some drainage improvements to mitigate that situation too.
The gymnasium, which is great, we like to broadcast high school wrestling from there a lot, and also other sports. That will still be open and ready and available for everything then.
That's
Yes.
right.
And the Memorial Field situation, that will not be covered within the referendum, correct?
No, that the Memorial Field we've done some work on Memorial Field over the past year. We've really upgraded that facility a great deal and met some of the needs there in terms of the safety of the facility, as well as having more seating for attendees at events there. That will, once we committed to keeping our high school at Westerly Parkway, we were really committed to continuing to use Memorial Field. We don't have room on Westerly Parkway for a football stadium, so we will continue to operate out of Memorial Field. The work that's being done through the referendum spending does not include those kind of athletic facilities.
With the buildings being built in the 50s and the 60s, there have been many changes that have happened, Americans with Disabilities Act, that kind of thing. Will you be able to just create a special area? Because kids, kids with special needs are now encouraged to be in the school itself, not in a special area, anything like that. What impact will that be for which buildings and et cetera there to make those more accessible?
Right. I think you were exactly right when you described the inclusive environment that we have for all students within our community. And obviously, a more modern facility will allow us to do that in an effective and efficient way. We have some challenges right now in both the South Building and the North Building in terms of providing access to all educational spaces for all students. Obviously, this updated and flexible plan will allow us to meet those needs.
Voters go on Tuesday.
That's right.
Your gut right now, does it pass?
I'm going to make my prediction on the 21st.
Okay, that's
So.
a good, everybody's a better with it. Now let's, worst case scenario here. It does not pass. What do you do then?
We would really need to look at the margin for how closely it passed, and we're going to need to circle around with the community and try to find out what the sticking points were, what were the concerns with this plan before we move forward. But what we do know is that we've kind of run out the clock on these buildings. We can't continue to operate these buildings as they are without investing in the systems that have failed in these buildings in terms of the mechanical, electrical, plumbing, heating systems in those buildings that need to be replaced right away. Those we're going to have to do something. So, you know, best case scenario, this passes and we're able to implement a plan that provides for a better educational facility for our students. But if we are not able to pass a referendum, we will have to make a major investment into these buildings one way or another.
Scott, we were talking a little bit before we started today about the last few referendums within the state that have taken place. Talk about one of the ones that just lost by, what, 50 votes?
There was one in York County that lost by 50 votes. Obviously, we don't want to be in that kind of a situation. We want to make sure, and I think, you know, even with our conversation today, we've described the outreach to the community. It's really important, we feel, that people can make an informed decision on May 20th. And whether we've been talking to the community groups, PTOs at the elementary school, church groups, our goal was to provide people with the best and most information possible.
And I do have a positive feeling from the interactions we've had with so many community groups, and even going door to door. A lot of board members have been knocking on doors throughout the school district, talking to people at their homes to make sure that people have as much information as they need to make an informed vote. You know, I have gotten a lot of positive feedback, so we'll see.
Well, I have to commend both of you on the way that you've presented the proposal today and the way you've reached out to people, because all politics is local, but I think when it comes to schools, it's really not a political issue. It's more of what's best, and if you're going to invest, at least it's local money staying locally to do that kind of a thing.
It is.
To wrap things up, we've got about 20 seconds left. Direct people, if they want to learn more about what we've talked about today, give us the website if you would, please.
So we have a website at the school district website, www.scasd.org/state-high-future. If you visit that website, not only can you find a lot of information on the project, but also there's a series of videos explaining.
Thank you for being here today. Thank you for watching For the Record. We'll see you again soon. Bye-bye.